I've been anticipating this episode for a really, really long time. This week we are reviewing Captain America the Winter Soldier, which is an absolute treat, so stay tuned for Hero Blend number 9. We have a very exciting show for you this week. I am back once again with associate editor from ComingSoon.net and Superhero Hype, Silas Lesnick. How's it going, man?
How's it going?
I think you're just as excited as I am about this, right?
About Captain America? Absolutely.
As mentioned in the intro, we are talking about Captain America the Winter Soldier this week because I can finally talk about it. I've been waiting. We saw it about a week ago, and it just absolutely blew our minds. Yeah, right?
Well, I mean, as we left, they told us we were allowed to tweet. I called it a perfect film. I still stand by that.
As I've thought about it, I will say that in my tweet afterwards, I said, may be the greatest solo film that Marvel has produced. I said that because I wanted to think on it a little bit. Honestly, I'm ready to just call it the best Marvel film yet. I think it is absolutely astounding. And absolutely incredible. So let's break it down. Actually, let's first talk about expectations going into it, because I think both you and I were extremely excited for this, but we also had pretty good reason.
Absolutely. I think one of those reasons is Thor the Dark World.
Yes.
Which, for all intents and purposes, isn't a great movie. It doesn't have a great script, and yet I loved it just because it's Marvel doing what Marvel does best.
Absolutely.
Which is going back over and amping everything up. So even a mediocre Captain America sequel, I probably would have loved.
Exactly, and also, I mean, the fact that Joe and Anthony Russo, the directors of this film, were in talks a couple weeks ago about potentially directing Captain America 3. They are attached now, but that whole deal was because, you know what, Captain America the Winter Soldier is pretty amazing. We kind of want to lock these guys in. So, I mean, the buzz has been around for quite a while. Both of us were extremely excited, just as Marvel fans. So let's just talk about the movie itself. What would you say was your favorite part of the film?
Honestly, I would say, despite the fact that it's called The Winter Soldier, it's not necessarily a modern Captain America. I mean, it's set modern day. It definitely deals with modern things.
Sure.
But it encompasses the entire history of Captain America.
Absolutely.
There's a huge amount of the 70s teaming with the Falcon.
Of course.
There's some surprises that I won't even go into, but we get glimpses from throughout all
generations. And actually, that is one thing that I found most impressive about it, is that it's a film that there are always, with comic book movies, there are always these details from the comics that are always considered too science fiction-y, too wild to really translate into live action. We've seen that a lot with costumes especially, but this movie, I'm not going to give it away. We're going to keep this entire conversation spoiler-free for your benefit, but they do some really, really cool stuff that I think all of you comic book fans are really going to enjoy. But you also mentioned Falcon, which is a character I definitely want to talk about, because the portrayal is fantastic, the character is fantastic, the performance is fantastic. I mean, what did you think of this introduction?
I wouldn't even say just the fact. I mean, Falcon's fantastic. The thing I really liked about it was he's playing a guy with post-traumatic stress from being a veteran.
Absolutely.
And yet it's not dark. He's not a guy that's brooding, and yet you see that within him, and it feels like a very realistic portrayal.
And not only is it realistic, it is the kind of the defining quality that gets him connected with Captain America. These are two characters that literally meet in the first scene, but a connection is established between them. Just, you can feel it. I mean, part of it comes between Anthony Mackie and Chris Evans just having great on-screen chemistry together. But the larger purpose is just like these are two guys who have a shared experience of being in war. Captain America, of course, probably gets people running into him all the time just because he helped save New York in the Battle of New York, or save the world anyway. But this is a guy he could really connect to on an emotional level, and I think they absolutely knocked that out of the park.
I think one of the things that Captain America, as a franchise, looking at both the original and this one has going forward, is the supporting cast is pretty incredible.
Oh, totally.
In the first one, we had Stanley Tucci, we had
Tommy Lee Jones,
Cooper, Haley Atwell.
Yep.
It's even amped up in this. It's great seeing Black Widow again. This is her best movie as well.
Yeah, that's another thing. S.H.I.E.L.D. plays a gigantic role in this film, which of course means that we not only see Black Widow, we get to see Nick Fury, we get to see
Nick Fury kicking ass.
Nick Fury actually getting a full-on action role. There is a car sequence in this film that you're going to be thinking about for a really, really long time, because it is just epically cool. But
actually, if we can talk about the car sequence for a second, not to have any spoilers, but one of the things I loved about the car sequence is just from the get-go, Nick Fury tries to say, let's fly out of here, because it's the Marvel Universe and cars can fly.
As we learned in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Coulson has a flying car, so why wouldn't Nick Fury have a flying car? And he asked his car to fly. It can't fly because it's been damaged.
But the idea that we have this Marvel Universe now where, like, oh, we don't want to see a fight scene with a flying car because it's instantly going to become silly, but it's nice to acknowledge it, and it works really well.
And it just it naturally fits in with everything that you're seeing around the entire... And because there's also the fact that Nick Fury's car is also particularly badass, but that's something that we could potentially get into at another point in time. But I do also want to get back to talking about Black Widow, because this is a character who I was really excited to see in this film from the minute that she was announced, because this is Black Widow has a very gray version of morality. She grew up as an assassin. She's been a spy her entire life. But Captain America sees the world in black and white. When he was fighting the world's problems, it was Nazis. Nazis are a black and white problem. That's not really the world we live in anymore. And I thought pairing those two characters together was extremely smart, and the way they pulled it off was absolutely fantastic.
I mean, totally agreement.
I'm afraid that we're going to be a lot of that, but we are at the same time giving you a perspective of this film. But
it's honestly, it's a film that even if I knew nothing about Captain America, I think I would enjoy just because it's so well directed.
Yes, that's another thing. Joe and Anthony Russo, these are guys that were producers on shows like Community and Arrested Development, and you don't really expect them to be making blockbuster action movies. But holy crap, do they pull it off here? It's mind-blowing, absolutely.
Well, I mean, saying that, honestly, going back to some of their Community episodes, you see the potential. You just imagine if they had a much, much bigger budget, what would it look like? And the answer is The Winter Soldier.
Yeah, it's very true. And I mean, they directed one of the paintball episodes. They definitely kind of been honing those action skills. Now they've had a chance to prove it, and they have. So let's talk about the negatives here. Like, what did you not like about this movie? It's a tough question, admittedly.
I guess straying as far as we can from exactly what I mean by this.
Okay.
There are a couple elements that I thought were going to be in the movie that weren't.
Okay. I think I know what you mean, and
I think we can safely say it's known that Captain America 3 is coming.
Yes.
I'm very curious to see what happens.
It does. Well, that's another
thing. I mean, Avengers in between.
This movie leaves the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, this has been widely announced that this movie has a bigger impact on the Marvel Cinematic Universe probably than any film that they've made so far. 100% true. So it's going to be amazing to see how that goes into Avengers, of course, into Captain America 3. If I had to say anything that I had taken issue with, it's that, I mean, some of the supporting characters that we knew were going to be in this film from the comics, they don't necessarily get the biggest roles in the world, but at the same time, I can't really blame the film for that because they are used in equal measure to their purpose, and it's not overdone. The movie uses the characters exactly as they should. I can't really complain about that, but at the same time, I'm also really hoping to see a lot more of them in the sequels. I realize that is super cryptic because I just don't want to give away that much, because this is a conspiracy thriller, and you want to have those secrets.
Honestly, it's interesting to talk about because I think a lot of the things that are considered spoilers, I've seen people on our own message boards complain about who the Winter Soldier is, and
that's very true.
To me, even when it was in happening in the comics, it was sort of everyone knew.
And this is also a movie, like the fact that Sebastian Stan came back for the role. It's not really a secret that Bucky Barnes is the Winter Soldier. Of course, if you know absolutely nothing about comics, this might be a surprise. But honestly, the movie, I think it's a second act reveal. It's not like this is the big third act conclusion that is going to make you gasp. It has many other things to do that for it. But it is. I mean, that is something interesting. But at the same time, there are major elements that you do not want to get spoiled on, including the post-credit sequence, which
two post-credit
sequences. At this point, all of you Marvel fans should know to stay through the end credits. Constantly at screenings, even critic screenings, which is even the worst. I see people still getting out of their chairs and leaving. Stay in your seats through both end credits because there's a lot to see, and it's pretty cool. Silas, final thoughts?
I just want to say real quick, we haven't even scratched the surface on some of the things, but Frank Grillo?
Yes.
I mean, if you hadn't noticed him before, he's a guy that sticks out as
absolutely, and he's definitely
he should be in more films.
And again, he plays Crossbones. We know this is an antagonistic role. He's pretty badass, and it's pretty great. And I mean, all the fight sequences are fantastic. But watching him move, he has fight sequences against both Cap and Falcon. Again, I'm scratching surfaces. But
not only is it a really good take on Crossbones, it's a Crossbones that you wouldn't necessarily think of. He doesn't necessarily look like the Crossbones from the comic. And yet it works totally.
It does.
And then there was Robert Redford.
And then there's Robert Redford, who we can't... I mean, the guy just by himself brings so much clout to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, this is a studio that's never really had a problem getting big-name actors, but he's fantastic in it. So, basically, I guess we're going to say go see Captain America the Winter Soldier as soon as you possibly can. Silas?
Which, if you're watching a web show about superheroes, you're probably going to do anyway.
Yeah,
be extra exciting because it genuinely is really, really
You
good.
guys are in for a very big treat. Silas, thanks so much for
being
on the show again, and enjoy.